We continue now at the top of Daf Tesam and Beis in Meseches Sukkah. This is Sukkah Daf 9b. The Mishnah says, Ha'osa sukkaso tachas ha'ilon. If somebody makes his sukkah underneath a tree, ki'ilu asa b'soch habayis. It's the same thing as making it inside a house. Rashi over here says upsula, and that would be pasul. Kedetanya bebraisa begemara is the Bryce, and the Gemara is going to say. The Mishnah continues, Sukkah al gabe sukkah. Let's say you build a sukkah on top of another sukkah. Ho'elyona kesheira v'hatachtona psula. The upper sukkah is going to be kosher. The lower one, the bottom one, is going to be pasul. And Rashi says, T'shnei sechochen yesh lo. The one in the bottom has two sets of schach. Ukra pasul sukkah tachas sukkah kidel kamon. It's a pasuk that says, if you have one sukkah beneath another sukkah, that's going to be a problem. The Elyona does not have that same issue. And the Mishnah continues, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Im ein diyurin bo elyon, if there's no one living in the upper one, hatachtona ksheira, the bottom one is going to be kosher. And Rashi says, B'Gemara mefarshal, this is going to be explained in the Gemara. And the Gemara says, Omar Rava says, Lo shanu ela be'ilon shetzilso meruba mechamasa. When we say over here in the Mishnah that if you make a sukkah under a tree, it's a problem, that's only if the tree has more shade than sun. Aval chamasa meruba metzilso, but if it's a tree which has more, which allows in more sun than shade, kesheira, then the sukkah is going to be kosher. And the Gemara says, Mimai, how do you know this is true? Because the Mishnah says that when you build a sukkah under a tree, it's as if you built it in a house. So lamali lemisni ki'ilu asa b'soch habayis. Why do you have to say that it's as if you built it in a house? Lisni psula. Why don't you just simply say, if you make your sukkah under a tree, it's pasul? What do you have to make this comparison for? Rather, it's to come to teach us the Elon Dumya Debayis. We're comparing the case of Elon to the case of a house. Mabayis tilsum rub mechamasa, just like a house, there's more shade than sun. So too, Elon, when it comes to the tree, tilsum rub mechamasa. We're talking specifically about a case where it's more shade than sun. And Rashi over here says, Lomali lemisni kilo asa b'soch habayis. What do you have to say compared to the case of the house? They're all learned out from the same pasuk anyway. Why are you connecting one to the other? And the Gemara continues, but let's say it is a case where the tree lets in more sun than shade. So how come it's tarif schach pasul b'hadis schach kosher? Still, it should be a problem, because aren't you joining together schach pasul together with schach kosher? And Rashi over here explains, how come it's tarif schach pasul mechuber schach pasul. The tree, all of those branches are considered pasul because they're attached to the tree, they're attached to the ground. Dechsiv, like the pasuk says, "Biaspecha migarnecha mikvecha mimashata ma'asef migarnecha asay sukkascha bepsolas goren." That which you gather into your granary, that leftover stuff that was already cut, that's what you make a sukkah. Kagon kashin, uvepsolas yikev, kagon ashkolos, rekanios, azmuros, right? Different kinds of branches, different kinds of shoots. Al matalish bin, and the idea is it needs to be talish. It needs to be detached from the ground. And over here, here you're taking the shade from the tree and you're combining it with the shade of the schach, and it's completing the shade of the sukkah. So how could that be kosher? If I'm taking the shade of schach pasul and using that to make my sukkah, to help make my sukkah, to assist with the schach that's kosher, that should be a problem. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Papa says, B'shechavton. The case over here is where you lower the branches of the tree and you mix them, you intermingle them with the schach kosher. And as Rashi will explain, it's an idea of bittul. The schach pasul is actually batel barov. It's batel in the majority of schach kosher. Once you can identify it, once it's mixed together, you can apply bittul. Rashi says, B'shechavton, hishbil anaf of lamata me'uravin im schach kosher. You lower the branches and you mix them with the schach kosher. Ve'ein nirin be'ein, you can't see them with the eye anymore. U'schach kosher rabba olav, there's a majority of schach kosher, u'mevatlan, it's going to be bottled. The midoraisa kal mili bottle beruba. There's a halacha, midoraisa, things are bottled berov, kiritnan masnisin haya sikuch meruba mehen kshera. It's going to say that in the Mishnah also later on. If you have a majority of schach kosher, it's going to be okay. So that's the case over here. That's why, in this case, if you have a tree where the tree lets in general, the tree lets in more sun than shade, and you mix together the branches, that's actually not going to be a problem. So the Gemara says, but 1 second. If you're mixing the branches in together, what do you even need to say that for? As Rashi over here says, why What is the point of Rava to tell us that in such a case it's kosher by chamso meruba mitzilso? The Mishnah has to go out of its way to say it's as if you made it in the house, to compare it to a house, to say that if you have more sun than shade, it's kosher. To tell us this whole thing that it's only possible if it's similar to the house. But over here it's so obvious, because if it's more sun than shade, you have very few branches, and you have a majority of schach kosher, nobody would ever think to make a puzzle. You don't have two sets of schach. It's all one anyway. And also it's not a problem that it's attached to the ground, because it's batal barov. So therefore, again, it should be obvious in this case. And so the Gemara says it's not so obvious. Because what might you have thought? And I might have thought, even in a case where you lower the branches, you intermingle them, maybe we should make a gzeira because of a case where you don't intermingle. Maybe you actually would say it's a problem. Kamash malan delo gazrin, and that's what Rav is coming along to teach us over here. That we don't make such a gzeira, and it's going to be kosher b'shechavtan. But the Gemara continues, Hanami Tanina, but this also, we have straight in the Mishnah that b'shechavton, it's not a problem. The Mishnah says, Hidlo les hagefen vesadalas vesakisos. Let's say a person takes the vine, a person takes the gourd, a person takes the kisos, and Rashi says, kisos esev hamispashid mode, it's a grass that spreads out a lot, v'sharoshav ki'ilon, v'karo ki'ilon, v'koron le'idra mispashid v'ol al-chomos, again, it's like ivy, basically. It spreads out along the walls, etc. So if you take all of these things, and you lift it up, v'sikech al-gab, and you put schach on it, psul, it's going to be puzzle. But then the Mishnah continues, if you have majority of kosher schach and it's all intermingled, or obviously if you cut these things and they're no longer attached to the ground, ksheira, it's going to be kosher. And the Gemara clarifies, hey Chidami, what's the case over here? If the case is it's not intermingled together with the other schach, how come it's tarv schach pasel and schach kosher? That would obviously be a problem. Who cares even if you have majority? You're combining schach pasel with schach kosher, and you can see the schach pasel. You can't rely on bittul. Elalav kishachavtan. Obviously, the case over here also is where you take this schach pasel that's attached to the ground and you intermingle it, you lower it together with the regular schach. Ushmamina delo gazrinan. And you see from over here that there is no gezerah. It's straight out in the Mishnah. So again, why does Rav and why does our Mishnah need to teach something which is taught later on anyway? So the Gemara says, Mao detema hanimili b'diavad. No, I might have thought that Mishnah is only b'diavad after the fact. You already did it that way. Fine, so it's kosher. Aval lechatchila lo, but to do it this way lechatchila, maybe I would think it's a problem. Kamash malon, that's what they're teaching us over here, that even lechatchila, it's okay. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, quoting the Mishnah, Sukkah al gabe Sukkah. Let's say you have a situation, again, a Sukkah on top of another Sukkah. So as we said, the upper one is kosher, the lower one is going to be pasul. Tana Rabban, and the rabbis taught by Sukkahs Teshu, it says you dwell in the Sukkahs, the lo b'Sukkah shetachas ha-Sukkah. It means one sukkah, but not a sukkah that's underneath another sukkah, a single sukkah. But it's problematic if you have a sukkah that's under another sukkah. V'lo b'sukkah shatachas ha'ilon, you can't have a sukkah under a tree, like we said before. V'lo b'sukkah shebesoch habayis, you can't have a sukkah inside a house. Again, also like we said before. Gemara says, Adrabah, 1 second, on the contrary, basukos tarti mashma, the word basukos is plural. So therefore, it's mashma the opposite. You could have a sukkah under a sukkah. You could have a double sukkah. So the Gemara answers, Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak answers, basukos ksiv. It says the word without a vav. It's written without a vav. It's read as if it's plural, but it's written in the singular, and therefore you're not allowed to have a sukkah tachas ha-sukkah. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Pa'amim sheshtein ksheros, pa'amim sheshtein psulos, pa'amim shetachtona ksher v'alyona psula, pa'amim shetachtona psula v'alyona kshera. When it comes to sukkah tachas ha-sukkah, you could have a situation where both are kosher, a situation where both are pasul. You could have a situation where the bottom one is kosher, the upper one is pasul, and you can have the opposite where the bottom one is pasul and the upper one is kosher. And now the Gemara explains. Pa'amim sheshtein ksheros. It's possible to have both of them kosher as follows. Hey chidami, what's the case? Kagon shetachtona chamasam ruba mitzilsa. The lower sukkah, there's actually more sun than shade. The schach on the lower sukkah alone will not create a kosher sukkah. And the upper sukkah, that is more shade than sun. And also, the upper sukkah is within 20, so effectively it's not too high for the people all the way on the bottom. It's within 20 amos, and in such a situation, the schach on top of that upper sukkah will actually count for everything for the lower sukkah as well. You could have a situation where they're both pasul. Hechidami, what's the case? You could have a case where the shade is more than sun in both cases. So on its own, the lower sukkah would have been kosher, but it's got this one on top of it. And also, the upper one is higher than 20 amos. So now it's too high, so therefore that can't be kosher either. Sometimes the lower one is kosher and the upper one is pasul. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Amud Aleph.